Here's some more practice with the law of detachment and law of syllogism, because it can be kind of confusing. So, the law of detachment is if you know that P implies Q is true, and you know that P is true, then you can conclude that Q is true. The law of syllogism is if you know that P implies Q is true, and you know that Q implies R is true, then you can bypass the Q's and say that P implies R is true. So make sure that you're underlining your P's, your Q's, and your R's to see which one you're using, and you might not even be using one. So if I go to the movie, that's P, then I'll eat popcorn, Q. If I eat popcorn, that's not any different than the Q before, so that's Q. Then I'll enjoy the movie, that's new, that's R. So we have P implies Q, Q implies R, so we can conclude that P implies R. And now I'm going to write that out. So if I go to the movie, I will enjoy the movie. That's my conclusion. The conclusion needs to be a sentence, or you could also write nothing if there's nothing to conclude. So the law of logic I used was the syllogism. Number 2, if a figure is a square, that's P, then it is a rectangle, Q. If a figure is a rectangle, that's just like our previous Q, then it has 4 right angles. That's completely new, R. So I know that P implies Q is true, Q implies R is true, then I can conclude that P implies R. So I'm going to write out the sentence. So I wrote out, if a figure is a square, that's P, then it has 4 right angles. Again, that's the law of syllogism. Okay, number 3, if I miss my bus, P, then I'll be late for school, Q. I miss my bus, P. So we have P implies Q is true, and we know P. So we can conclude Q. So if I miss my bus, then I'll be late for school. And this is by the law of detachment. If this wind keeps up, P, then we will lose some trees, Q. We lose some trees, Q. So I have that P implies Q is true, and then I'm given Q. So there is nothing that you can determine. It's not the law of detachment. The law of detachment would have P implies Q and then the P. This one has P implies Q, then the Q. Next one, all accountants enjoy math. So this is not written as a conditional, so I'm going to write it as a conditional because it's easier to see what the P and Q's are. I ended up writing out the black statement as a conditional and the blue statement as a conditional. So the black statement is, if a person is an accountant, then they enjoy math. And I took the blue statement to be, if a person enjoys math, then they are intelligent. So I'm going to take these statements and do P, Q, Q, R. So this is P implies Q, Q implies R, so I can conclude that P implies R. So my conclusion would be, if a person is an accountant, then they are intelligent. I don't have enough room to write it, but it is if a person is intelligent, then they are, or if a person is an accountant, then they are intelligent. P implies R. And the law of logic is syllogism. So my strategy would be to write it as a conditional. It's a lot easier to see. Okay, the bottom half. If a person is a librarian, P, then they read books, Q. If a person is a friend of Dana's, This is new. So if it's new, I'm going to call it R. Then they read books. Q. Because I've already have a they read books right there. So I have P implies Q is true. And R implies Q is true. This isn't anything. This is not the law of syllogism or the law of detachment. So you say nothing can be concluded. Number 7. If an animal is a pig, P, then it is a mammal, Q. Leon is a pig, P. So we have P implies Q, and P is true. So this is the law of detachment. So our conclusion is that Leon, P, is a mammal. And number 8, if a quadrilateral is a square, P, it has 4 congruent sides, Q. Quadrilateral ABCD has 4 congruent sides. So that's Q. So we have P implies Q is true, and then we're given Q. So this is, again, it's nothing. If it was law of detachment, it would be P implies Q, and then P is true, but this is nothing. Can be concluded. If my mother lets me to go to a movie, P, then I will be happy, Q. My mom lets me go to a movie, P. So this is the law of detachment, and what you can conclude is I will be happy. We can conclude the P. And the last one, if a man is wealthy, then he buys a mansion, P, Q. If a man buys a mansion, Q, he can hire a housekeeper. That's new, R. So I have P implies Q, Q implies R. So then I can say that P implies R. So I'm going to write that out. So if a man is wealthy, he can hire a housekeeper. P implies R. This is by syllogism. Okay, always label your P's, Q's, R's, and see how it matches up to one of the laws to make a conclusion.